Hi everyone, welcome to our 8 Notes English Standard January lectures. I hope you guys are all doing really well and having a wonderful start to the new year and also having a relaxing holiday break. So welcome, let's get started. Have a lot to get through today. My name is Aditi and I'll be taking you through today's lecture. Once again, a very warm welcome from all of us here at 8 Notes. Like I said, I hope you guys are having a smashing time and we are so excited to be back for another lecture series. Now, before we begin, as you know, we have lots of resources to offer here at 8 Notes and you can check them out on our website, and those resources includes our study notes. So we've got hundreds of downloadable study resources available online. We also have our lectures on this week, so we had our lectures on from Wednesday this week, so I hope you were able to attend all the ones that are relevant to you, and also we have some on tomorrow as well. And just a quick note from there, remember, so for this lecture it is a recorded session. However, you will have an amazing tutor in the live chat, Kayla, who is going to be helping you out today and answering your questions. So yeah, please welcome Kayla, and she'll be here to answer your questions today. So all our lectures, we're going to be on the live chat, so please ask us questions. We're here to help you. We want to help you out, and yeah, that's our job today. Along with that, you also have access to the slides just below in the resources section, so definitely check those out as well. Download them, go through it as I'm going through the through my slides, and you will have access to this lecture for a week. You'll have access to the lecture for a week after the day of the stream, so after today while you're viewing it. So you'll have access to it for a week, and then after that it will be moved to one of our other platforms, which I'll talk about in just a sec. But in terms of the other resources we have to offer on our website, you know, we have our discussion forum, which is a great community of like past, present students and also tutors as well, and we're all on there helping each other out, so check that out. It's a great community, great lovely people, and along with that we have our newsletters, our articles, and also online videos that you can all check out on our website. So along with that, we also have 8 Notes Plus, which is our own catalog of resources, and these include our study guide. So we have a variety of study guides, so course notes. They are all very condensed and sorted according to the syllabus, which will which I have personally been a big user of those in my year 12 days. So I was a big Ed Unlimited person, and I also had access to the tutoring as well, and from experience I can say that wonderful resources that are definitely worth checking out. So you'll have access to a complete course notes, text guides, so there are like these awesome extensive text guides on most of the subjects and prescribed texts that you do in English, and also we have access to our topic test books as well, and past papers, so NEEP past papers. Yeah, and along with that we have added some amazing new resources, including our flashcards, so lots of flashcards for a variety of subjects, especially our STEM subjects, and we also have our own AI answer bot as well, and it is on 8 Notes Plus that you'll find a catalogue of all our lecture recordings as well. So once the lecture finishes, the recording will be available on here for everyone to access for a week, and then after that it is exclusively available on 8 Notes Plus. So if you have any questions about any of these resources, please ask, and we can help you out, and check them out on our website as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Once again, a very warm welcome. My name is Aditi. I graduated in 2021 as Dux, and the subjects that I do include English Extension, Advanced PTHPE, and Biology. I am currently at the University of Sydney studying Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Advanced Studies in Medical Science. So those are so it's a double degree, and I'm majoring in Medical Science and Political Economy. And generally I love reading, good shows, and sunny days. And in the live chat will be Kayla, who's helping you out today and answering your questions. And Kayla is one of our awesome bio PDHPE English tutors. She got a state rank in PDHPE, and of course amazing marks in biology and English, and I'm sure she can answer any questions about that, any questions about what she's doing right now. She is pursuing dancing right now, and she took a gap year last year, and I think she's getting back into, so feel free to ask her questions about that as well. But we're here to help you today, both of us, so looking really forward to it. So let's get started. There are 4 things that we're kind of going to go through today, right? We're going to spend the first solid block on common module revision, and that's to make sure that you guys feel confident with how to, firstly, confident in everything you've covered in common mod in school, and then also confident in how you're going to approach the revision of common mod in your own time throughout this year. We'll then talk about module A and what exactly it involves and what we're looking for. We'll then quickly talk about module C and finish off by looking at some general study tips and I'll also give you guys some practice questions at the end for you to have access to. So let's get started. And I'm sure this image right there is a collective human experience that we all go through, which is the common module headache, right? And I'm sure you've had a full term of that last year, or most of you have, if you've done common mod. If you haven't, or if you started with a different module, you're gonna have it too. So you're gonna get that. It's a collective experience for every single year 12 student. So here we are. Now, just let me have a quick sip of water before I continue. Okay, so this is where we're at. You have just gone through a full term of learning common module, learning what's it about, studying your one prescribed text, but also most of you would have probably studied a related text, and more than likely you would have been assessed through either a multimodal or some sort of pre-prepared essay that you either had to write on the spot or hand it in, or they gave you like a couple of questions and you had to scaffold a response to that. Either way, your assignment probably in terms of multimodal, again, you would have written some sort of an essay and then adapted that to the multimodal media, like to the format of that, or you would have written a pre-prepared essay to a question you may have vaguely been told, or you may have been given some hints about it. So it was sort of assisting you in a way, right? So it's some schools may have done like a proper HSC style thing where they didn't tell you the question, they gave you like a timed assignment. Whatever it was, it's been like you would have been tested on it, but of course we know it's not the HSC, it's not the proper thing, but you would have been tested on it. You would have had some notes, some essays, something ready to go, for common mod. So we've done that now. After doing that, though, you would have gotten feedback. You may have liked your feedback. You may have thought you did really well. You may have absolutely hated your feedback and, been really down because of what you got. And either way, that's fair. And it happens. It's only the first assignment of common module. So here's the answer to one of, and I can tell this will be the question in the chat, because from the chats I did on Wednesday, I did 3 of them. The first question was, what if, like, do I just forget about it if I got bad marks in that first assignment? Like, is it all over from there? And the answer is no, it's not. I'll make Kayla's job easy here, and I'll say right now, no, it is not. Even if you didn't like common mod, even if the feedback you got on your essay was bad, doesn't matter. That's just that first assignment. It's only a quarter of half of what you're going to get in the long run, right? Half of your internal HSC mark. So in the bigger scheme of things, it's okay. it's gonna be all right. So here's what we do now. We now focus on breaking down common module, focus on smaller chunks of revision, focus on working on our essays, like our proper essays for the HSC. We ditch the related text. We bring our full attention to the analysis and the ideas of the prescribed text, and we are then assessing ourselves under exam conditions with totally unseen questions. That's what we need to do now. And this is where having an open mind and applying that feedback, or if you got like vague feedback, you know, sometimes it could just be like, you know, your marks a B or a C or whatever because your analysis wasn't as good, and your writing didn't flow, right? If you get that sort of feedback, this is where you go back and you get more specific feedback and you say, all right, where exactly was I lacking in my analysis? Was it my evidence? Was it my analysis? Like, was it the textual analysis of that evidence? Was it linking back to the question? In terms of flow, was it the ideas and the way I expressed them? Was it the fact that the ideas didn't match each other? You get to the root cause of it, you write it down, and then you work towards it. And again, at the beginning of the lecture, a disclaimer, that is the only way to improve in English is to get feedback on your work. You're not, we don't just miraculously get 19s and 20s out of 20s. It takes time, it takes application, and it takes lots and lots of practice. And it's that practice, that application of the feedback that can get you there. And you are literally, you're not even halfway through the year at. You've barely started. So don't give up just yet. This is what we are going to do. And I hope you get some more clarity on the things that we have to do, for example, in the essays today, after today's lecture. But yeah, that was the first thing. So how will this affect your approach and study? We want to frequently and productively. I think more than frequent, the emphasis is on the word productive. You have to revise common module productively, right? That doesn't mean you are studying common module, every single day throughout the next 3 terms. That's just not viable. You've got, 4 or 5 other subjects to focus on. What it means is that you're trying to do a little every week, every 2 weeks, even for English, right? Because you're going to now start putting your focus on mod A. But even if you try and get common mod, just doing like a paragraph, a practice essay. If you don't have that time, 1 week, a practice essay plan, focusing on your analysis, writing down your analysis, focusing on just like doing little exercises where you just link back to the question. So many different ways in which you can just do little bits consistently throughout the year to get you to the place you want to be. So use this module to guide your learning, your note construction, and written responses. You are diving much deeper into prescribed text, and usually we see one of the weakest spots in essay writing tends to be textual analysis, right? Textual analysis and link back. I think everyone, again, from what I have like responses that I've seen and marked over the last two years as a tutor, 2022, 2023, it's starting my 3rd one now. What I've seen and marked, it's usually been like, I can see an amazing understanding of the text, like what's happening, how it links back to the syllabus, but it's just that ability to articulate and link back to the question to say, hey, this is what I mean in relation to my question, and this is exactly how it all fits together. That's where I see a lot of weaknesses. And also in the analysis, just elaborating on, this is the technique, this is the effect of the technique, and this is what it is trying to achieve. So that's what we are going to work on. And then once we've done that, once we've dived into our prescribed text, gotten our analysis together, we're then going to adapt to exam conditions, and utilize available resources. So that's to get as many practice questions on your hands on as you can, right? Get those practice questions, utilize them to maximize your success, right? So that's what we are doing now. But in order to do that, we need to go back to square one, and we are going to start again by looking at the syllabus. The syllabus is your best friend. It is the Bible of Year 12. It is the thing through which your questions will come. Your questions are not coming out of outside the syllabus, so you know that any question you get on the day, it will link back to one of these concepts. So if you can maximize your understanding of all of these concepts, and there aren't actually many different ones in there, like there are the key ones that they're going to test you on, right? A lot of it is, for example, where they talk about just your language and your structure and your form, and that's just inherent to your writing. It's the ideas they want you to actually look at in the text that you have to study, right? So your syllabus tells you that we are looking at individual and collective experience. We are looking at the representation of anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies, and so on. So that's really important. And remember, two key things that I literally ask you to write down. Firstly, it's that always remember your essays, they're an argument, not an explanation. Like, literally write that down and look at it every time you're writing an essay. It is an argument, it is not an explanation. So don't focus on explaining your ideas, don't focus on explaining what is happening in the text, because that's not what we're doing. We are arguing. And what are we arguing? We are arguing about a certain idea that links back to the rubric based on what the question is. So the first thing is your essays are an argument, not an explanation. And the second thing was what was the second thing? See, I forgot after saying the first thing. No, the second thing was that you are not actually studying the text itself, right? You're not studying what is happening in the text. You are studying the representation of human experiences in your text. So focus on it that way. Look at it through that lens, that you're going to study the representation of experiences, of anomalies, of paradoxes, of storytelling in that text. That's what you're after. That's the feedback you need to get. So you take what you need and you leave. Like, that's what you have to do. Okay, so let's actually look at the rubric now. Here we are. Here is our rubric. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. Firstly, it's about representation of individual and collective experiences. You are studying your text to see how individual and collective experiences are being represented. The key word here in this whole module, it's not experiences, it's not individual versus collective, it's not anomalies, paradoxes, it's not even storytelling. It's representation. That's it. That's the key word in this module. So, key concepts: representation of individual and collective experiences, human qualities and emotions, anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies, and role of storytelling. That is literally, those are the four main ideas from which your questions will arise. Those are the key ideas right there. All right, so we need to make sure that we are, we're focused on those. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that the rest of this doesn't make sense, or the rest of it is just there for the sake of being there. Not really. The rest of it talks about the more sort of soft features of the writing, right? Like focusing on context, purpose, structure, stylistic, and grammatical features. Focusing on interpreting and analyze complex texts. Being able to explore, interpret, and look at the language, how language is used to shape representation of a range of different texts, of forms, modes, and media. So all of that is obviously important. But it's it can be tested. Like for example, sometimes they can ask you about like a certain form. Like the question could be like pertaining to form, and how through conventions of form certain human experiences are being represented, right? So that can definitely happen, but we know that it's going to 99% of the time link back to one of these key four ideas right there. So there we are, four main concepts: individual and collective experiences, human qualities and emotions, anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies, and storytelling to reflect and express particular lives and cultures. So let's break it down. But what I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to fly through this bit, because I do think a bit of it is quite self-explanatory, and you will obviously have access to the slides for this one. But let's have a look. So encompassing the personal, private, that's looking at private as a self, public is ourselves amongst others, so that's pertaining back to the individual and collective. So you could use these terms like private and public and personal, right, to actually explain individual versus collective. So, and that can actually come in handy and help you avoid saying individual and collective over and over again. And sometimes questions will actually be phrased like that, like the public and the private world. And that's just telling you private world is your individual world, your individual experiences, public world is the collective. So here are some common things to look out for when you study the representation of individual and collective in your text. So here we are. We've got the individual includes attitudes, beliefs, ideas, ideologies, personalities. Collective includes norms, worldviews, responsibilities, and both come together to form identities, and both are influenced by identities, come together to form worlds, contexts, and experiences, and these things are common between the two. Qualities and emotions. Qualities encompass broader characteristics, and emotions are specific responses to specific responses to situations. So for example, in your text you can look at representation of qualities and emotions that we can relate to, that we are unfamiliar with, that we actively overlook, or that we may be afraid of acknowledging. So here are qualities and emotions there. Awesome. And now this is the bit I'm going to focus on, anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies. Sometimes these words get thrown around a lot, and one of the key mistakes, and easiest mistakes to make with the essays is to just simply use syllabus words for the sake of using them without any sort of tie back to the question, without any sort of proper links back. You're just like throwing it in just for the sake of it without linking it conceptually back to anything, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you are linking back, and everything you write is there for a reason, and it's just not name dropping stuff from the syllabus. So these three ideas are really important because it is very clear when you're just writing there that hence presenting anomalies in the text, right? A marker can tell that is vague. You have no idea what anomaly you're talking about. You're just trying to put in the word anomaly just for the sake of having some link back to the syllabus, whereas you actually talking about, let's say, a character in the text who is an anomaly, who goes against what is expected, and therefore through that reveals the complexity of the human nature, and that's the and that is a more conceptual link back to the text. And so the whole sort of the whole jazz behind anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies is to show that human behaviors and human motivations are complex. Humans are complex, intricate creatures. And that means we're not straightforward. The way we think is not straightforward. We're not, these steady, stable creatures, as much as we like to think we may be. We're not, and our motivations and behaviors can be very complex, and that's shown in our text. So let's quickly go through the definitions of each. Sorry, it's just a really hot day today. I think it was like 30 degrees plus today, so please bear with me. Alright, where was I? Yep, so let's go through the definitions of each. So, anomalies. So, anomaly is something that deviates from what is standard, normal, or expected. So, something that goes against what is expected in society. A paradox is a person or a thing that combines two totally opposite, two totally contradictory features or qualities together, like two polar opposite things coming together. And inconsistencies are something that fails to remain constant. So let's have a look at some examples. Now remember, they may sound nasty, these names that you haven't come across before, but they're just saying that human experiences are complex, right? So any question which asks you to focus on the complexity of human nature, you are referring back to these three. So let's have a look at some examples of each so you know what each one is. So for example, example of an anomaly is Harry in Past the Shallows. So in Past the Shallows, Harry is afraid of water, and he does not share a love for surfing like his brothers Miles and Joe do. So he is anomalous to his family. He's anomalous to, even his community, because he is afraid of water. Another example of an anomaly, a really popular one, is Winston from 1984. Winston is an anomaly because he goes against what is expected by society, and he does that by rebelling against the party instead of conforming to them, and he rebels. So he is an anomaly. Paradoxes are two really opposite things. So Danforth, for example, who is a judge in a Puritan society, he is antagonized, and he eventually misjudges people. So it's the idea of a judge who's supposed to bring to light justice is someone who eventually because of these collective pressures, misjudges and fails to do that. Another good example, again from 1984, personally my favorite one that just helps me remember paradoxes really well, is a quote which says, freedom, no, oh, forgot the quote, no, here we go, war is peace, ignorance is strength, and, oh no, I'm messing it up, but it's like war is peace, maybe someone's gonna know this in the chat, and I've said this quote like for 3 years. It was one of my quotes in my essays, and here we go, I've finally forgotten it. Oh, what is it? Oh. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. I think those are the three. But even, it's not the quote really, it's the idea, right? War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. It's these two really, really paradoxical ideas coming together. But that's a paradox there. All right. And last one, inconsistencies. So Jackie, who is motivated by his care for his son in Billy Elliot, he changes from rejection to acceptance in the end for Billy's passion for ballet. So he's originally very against it. They go through the whole story where he's very against it. He does not want Billy to pursue it, but ultimately he changes his opinion and supports his son, and that's inconsistency in the sense that it shows you how human nature changes, how human will and human behavior can change as a result of experiences, right? And that's represented in the text, that people can have a change of heart. And that's those three concepts. Last thing we look at is storytelling. Remember, your writers for your text, they're writing for a reason. As much as you may wish they hadn't written so you didn't have to read the text, unfortunately they have written. Those texts that are in the syllabus are, pretty critical texts, pretty impactful, and we need to actually look at how are they expressing and reflecting particular lives and cultures. What are they telling us about the lives and cultures that we may not have experienced on our own, and why are they doing that? Remember, storytelling is an agent for communication. They're using that storytelling to communicate something, and storytelling in itself is the use of stories and narratives, and it is shared as a means to instill moral values, and it allows us a window into the experiences of others that may or may not align with our own, and as a result learn something from that. Culture refers to the ideas, customs, and social behaviors of particular people or groups, and this includes experiences that are shaped by social class, gender, nationality, race, and lifestyle. So we have to look at how through storytelling, your authors are reflecting lives and cultures. Whose lives and cultures are they reflecting, right? And this is where you will link back to the author's own context. What are they trying to show? And you bring this idea in, definitely in your thesis, because that's part of, this rubric focus is this idea of storytelling. So you could bring it in your thesis, you could bring it in your links back to the question, your links back to the question, to the thesis. But you have to make sure that you bring this idea of storytelling back end, and I do think it can be integrated in pretty easily, right? Like just using keywords like through storytelling. For example, through storytelling, Orwell portrays the fears and anxieties of his own World War II audience, right? Or post World War II audience. And that tells me that he is reflecting the lives and cultures, the lives and the anxieties of the people who'd lived just after World War II, who'd experienced the atrocities of the war, and who'd gone through all of that. And now he's showing us what nightmare reality can be if, you know, us as individuals aren't aware. And that's his purpose in storytelling. So this is where you have to do a bit of research, you have to find out context, you need to know this, and you have to include this in your essays, and this will elevate your response. And I think that's the syllabus. Remember, they're not just abstract concepts, you need to apply them to your prescribed text. That's really, really important. So ask yourself questions when it comes to each of those to include them and ask yourself, what are some individual and collective human experiences that are represented in your text? For human qualities and emotions, consider what human qualities are displayed in your text. Are any of these qualities reaffirming or challenging expectations? In what ways does your text explore emotion and or evoke an emotional response? Then think about anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies. You can look at what are some human motivations that are seen in your text, what are some behaviors that actually emerge as a result of those motivations, and can you identify any of them as anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies? Now, even when you link back to these, right, don't just be vague and be like, therefore representing complexity of the human experience, the human nature, right? That's pretty vague. That's just me explaining a concept to you, but you need to apply that to your text. For example, you need to apply that to your text and say, hence showcasing the complexities in individuals' behavior, you know, as a result of their motivations, and linking back to, for example, specific motivations for your character in the text. So if I was talking about Winston and I was talking about how he is an anomaly, I would say, hence portraying the intricate nature of his experiences, as a result of the party's control and power, leading to his individual will to rebel against the party. So a couple of things to focus on there. I don't want to repeat or explain what's happening in the text. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not saying, as a result of the party's constant surveillance, the use of so and so to monitor their homes, which as a result Winston pairs up with Julia in order to rebel against the party, but he's betrayed by O'Brien, and so on. Like, that is retelling. That's me telling what happened in the text versus me saying that as a result of his experiences and the party's control and oppression, his individual will to rebel succeeds, right? So there's a big difference between the two. So just be mindful of that. Do not retell, do not explain what's happening in the text, argue. And finally, role of storytelling. So how does your text use narrative to represent certain lives and cultures? And what is your text sharing? Why is your text sharing this narrative? Why is it being shown? Why is this whole thing significant? Okay, last quick thing, audience impact. Really important. 4 key audience impacts that are given in the syllabus, and we want to link these back to the text. So here they are. See the world differently, challenge assumptions, ignite new ideas, and catalyze personal reflection. So what you are doing is essentially we need to link back to each of those, but again, don't just be vague, don't just link back without actually having any solid links to the text there. You need to say that therefore allowing audiences to see the world differently, and to monitor the role of institutional powers around them. So if I was talking about 1984, I might talk about that. If I'm saying that ultimately challenges assumptions, I might say ultimately challenging audiences' assumptions of the power structure surrounding them, and encouraging audiences to be use awareness, or to be aware of the influences that shape them or something. So you want to link it back to the text, be conceptual, don't just say hence challenging assumptions. What assumptions? Right, so always try to be as specific as you can be, and try to assign these impacts to the element of your prescribed text. But a lot of the times this can change based on the question. Even if the question doesn't, sometimes the question can say like, how does the study of human experiences in your prescribed text invite audiences to see the world differently? So that's, in that question you actually need to link back to see the world differently specifically, because that's what the question is asking you. But sometimes the questions may not have anything to do with audience impact. It may just say, hence look at let's say it may say how does your prescribed text, explore the theme of power or something, right? There's nothing being said about the audience impact. That doesn't mean you don't talk about it. You still have to talk about it. You still figure out which audience impact you want to use, and you want to use one. Just another quick note with breaking down a question rather. Break down the question. When you see the question, break it down into 3 parts. The first part is the rubric focus, RF. So the rubric focus, what part of the rubric is it taking from? Which one, for example, which one of the 4 big ideas it is coming from. The next part is the prescribed focus. So that's like the main idea in the question itself that they want you to look at. So sometimes it could be a theme when the question wants you to like look at a theme specifically, like a theme of power, or it could be like, for example, they specifically want you to look at the use of language forms and features. Whatever it is, it's the main part of the question. And the last thing you look at is the audience impact. So that's the audience impact right there. And this is where you take one from here. Cool, let's move on then. Here we are. Now, have at least 3 quotes under each rubric concept, and that's to try and make sure that you can that you are actively linking back to each of the rubric concepts. And one quote, there will be many quotes that you come across that can be used for more than one rubric concept. So if that works, if you can use more than one quote, then use it. Work smarter, not harder. And now here is a very sample application of the concepts that we've just talked about, right? So in your essay, for example, if the question is an individual plus the collective, what we're going to do is, and the question specifically asks you to link back to, let's say, the individual and collective experiences, what you're going to do is, you're gonna obviously have your body paragraphs organized according to a theme. Like, I wouldn't recommend organizing your body paragraphs according to individual and collective experiences specifically. It would be themes, and then within that I would focus on the representation of individual experiences, collective experiences, and then both individual and collective. So I might do theme 1, individual experiences. So let's say for 1984 my theme is power and control, right? That would be my theme, but I'll focus specifically on Winston's individual experiences, and making sure that I'm not just talking about Winston the whole essay. I might use 1 quote from Julia and 2 from Winston. Then theme 2, I'm going to talk about the collective experiences. So let's say theme 2 is surveillance, but now I'm focusing more on collective experiences within that. So I might talk about, let's say, the Parsons kids, right? I might talk about a range of other characters and put them within the collective. So I'll try to focus on not just Winston and Julia, but also like other characters. And in the last theme, where let's say I focus on oppression, probably it tie up a lot with the first one, but it doesn't matter. Just for example, if I was focusing on, let's say I'm focusing on truth, right? Truth or reality or whatever. So one of those, again, I'm going to link back to a healthy balance between individual and the collective and try to bring that together. If your question is on qualities and emotions, you do the same thing. Theme 1, whatever theme is, where you focus on certain qualities that the characters have and that they develop as a result of their their emotions and their experiences. Then I'd focus on emotions and certain emotions that are arising from their experiences. And in theme 3, I'd link back to both. Same thing there, anomalies, paradoxes, inconsistencies. So I'd focus on one each. Again, not the theme. The theme is not anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies. Whatever the theme is, within that, I'm focusing on each one. And then for storytelling, I'd integrate storytelling throughout the essay. So that's that. Here is a sample application. So if I get a question about the individual and the collective, here we are. I'd have an intro. I would link it back to, so I have my 3 themes here: gender, acceptance, and nationalism. So I'd focus on individual experiences in this first paragraph, collective experiences in the second, and both individual and collective in the third paragraph. The word count here is just a very rough estimate of how much I want to aim to be writing. So this is essentially about, how many words is that? Yep, so this is about 950 words. See, you can write, it's just a very vague estimate. Ultimately, then in terms of word count, anywhere between 800 to 1,000. That's sort of the key. For a standard essay, yeah, maybe between the 800 to 900-ish mark. But remember, it's about the quality of your analysis more than anything else. So, yep, you can see we still use themes to structure our essay. We're not chucking the themes out. I wouldn't recommend structuring your essay like on characters, or you could, but I think probably better to do it on themes so that you can have a more, like, your evidence can have more variety, and then link it back to each of these each of these rubric concepts. Okay, you can make notes on when it comes to revision, themes, characters, definitely context. Oh, sorry about that. That looks weird, but that's okay. I've committed to it now. Okay, context, scene, setting, definitely rubric concepts. I write down the key rubric concepts and always link back to them. And of course, notes, research about scenes and themes like that would link back to your analysis. Cool. Now, a possible framework for your intros. Begin by presenting an overarching thesis, so about a sentence long, for example. Then introduce your text and apply your personal thesis to your text. So the overarching thesis is going to be a response to the question. Again, one of the key sort of things that I see in usually like the initial essays that we write, because we haven't written these essays before, so some of the key fallibilities that I see is just repeating the question back, and this is something that takes time to develop. Like I have looked back over at the first couple of essays that I wrote, definitely, and I could see where I was like, oh no, that's we had to work up from there, because I'd repeat back parts of the question. I think everyone does when you first start writing these essays. You're trying to make sense of what you're supposed to do yourself. No one just immediately has this amazing light bulb eureka moment and it's like, I know exactly what to write, exactly how much to write, exactly how to write. So here's this to help you. So begin by presenting an overarching thesis, a direct response to the question. So a direct response to the question means you're not repeating the question back, you're not just repeating it back in like a different form, you're not just using synonyms to like to repeat the question back. So for example, if the question is to what extent does your prescribed text bring to light or challenge assumptions about the individual and collective experiences? Let's say that's our question. A thesis that just repeats it back would be, let's say, George Orwell's 1984 brings to light, challenges assumptions about human experience, about public and private human experiences, and showcases the intricacies of the human nature. So that kind of statement is trying to answer the question but also trying to elaborate on it, but it's not quite Sorry, I think one of my chargers are plugged in and I just heard a bit of sparking, so let me just plug it in. Okay. Cool. Don't know what that was. Okay, where was I? So, yeah, so that sort of question, so that sort of thesis is trying to get there, but it's not quite getting there because we're just repeating back the whole thing about challenging assumptions. We're not actually saying what assumptions or elaborating on the idea. We are just repeating back the idea of public and private again, you know, the individual and collective. And to try and add to it, I'm just throwing in the idea of complexity of human nature, but it's not actually solid in that sense. So what I instead want to do is I want to break the question down. So I might say, so I want to break the question down. So I'm going to think to myself, what assumptions are being challenged in 1984, and what individual and human experiences, or what they pertain to, like in the text. You know, we know that's only, you know, you usually have that 1 to 2 sentences to write this. Generally it's one, so you don't have like a lot of time to elaborate on it. You do that later on. But still, we don't just merely want to repeat back the don't just want to repeat back the question. So instead, my thesis might look like George Orwell's 1984, written in 1949, challenges assumptions about the role of political powers and political institutions through the representation of Winston's individual and the Oceania's collective experiences, bringing to light the complexity of human nature or complexity of experiences in a totalitarian society. So that is now more conceptually linked back, and that gives me room to go ahead and to like really elaborate on that, and that's what I do here. So actually in that example I just introduced this text and applied the thesis because it was a straightforward question. So, if the question is, for example, like a quote question where they've given you like a fancy quote, in those sorts of questions I'd usually use the first sentence to break it down and to present an overarching thesis. So let's say if the quote is storytelling is a means of learning what we don't know. Let's say that's my question. It's a very basic quote, but just stick with it. Okay, so yeah, just bear with me. So what was it? God, I just forgot that. Storytelling is a means of learning what we don't know. To what extent does this statement align with your study of your prescribed text? So for a question like that, I will now, because there's a bit to deconstruct there, I would deconstruct that thesis first, like that quote first. And I would, for example, say in my thesis, through storytelling, composers are able to bring to light experiences and you know, even circumstances, but let's say human experiences which may not resonate with our own, however, which provide a window into the lives and cultures of others. So it's more broad, but it's actually breaking that down. It's breaking down the idea of what it means for storytelling to show us experiences that we don't know, experiences that are not our own, experiences that may give us insight into other people's lives and cultures. So I've broken that down now, and then I'm going to link it to my text. This is seen in George Orwell's A Satire 1984, which by portraying the experiences of Winston, or which by portraying the experiences of those living in Oceania's totalitarian regime, brings to light the fears and anxieties of Orwell's post-World War II audience. Now I'm linking back to how the experiences, like through his storytelling, Orwell is showing us the lives and cultures of his time, and he's showing us these experiences of the people who are living in a totalitarian regime, and we are learning from that. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you can see how there's a difference between the two, between actually applying to the question whereas merely repeating the question. You then signpost your arguments and you provide further detail, and finally you identify the relevant audience impact. So here we are that is part of section 2, but remember your exam is going to have 2 sections, section 1 and section 2. Section 2 is our essay that we have just talked about. No related text is needed. Section 1, let's talk about it now. Remember, section 1 also it's also coming from the syllabus. They are also going to ask you about the representation of experiences, about one of those 4 key concepts, but they're not going to do that through a prescribed text. They're going to do it by giving you like 4 to 5 different images, text types, to allow you to on the spot look at how they're representing the human experience. How are they representing these ideas from the syllabus? So it's the same thing as section 2 in a way, but this time it's just on a more macro level where you're doing it on the spot to a range of text that you haven't seen. So this is now testing your understanding of how well are you able to not only analyze but also to understand these concepts that you have learned in the syllabus. So let's have a look. Here we are. In terms of structure for section 1, for 3 to 4 markers, we are answering using a paragraph. For 6 to 7 markers, we are aiming for a mini essay structure. So anything 6 marks plus, 6 or 6 marks plus, we're writing a mini essay structure. So in terms of the actual specific sort of internal structure of the paragraphs, for a 3 to 4 mark question, you begin with a concept or a topic sentence. So this is again a direct response to the question. I'm going to write it here. Direct response to the question. Okay. DRQ. Should have written DRS. No, DRQ. So direct response to the question. So that's that. Again, same thing as your essays. Now with short answer questions though, just a little minor thing is that, remember, if it's asking, for example, how does text 1 use language features and form to portray the human experience of power? Again, a vague response that is trying to get there may look like text 1 utilizes language forms and text 1 effectively utilizes language forms and features to portray the role of power in so and so. So that's okay. And the idea of so and so, like what we actually talk about when it comes to the portrayal of power, that's going to link back to the text that they've given you. Whatever's in the text, that's essentially what you're talking about. So you know that something in the text is going to talk about power. There's going to be some ideas about power. It is up to you to decide what those ideas are. All right, but a more particular response would look like text 1 effectively utilizes symbolism and metaphor to portray or to bring to light the portrayal of power as both an internal and external force, which does so and so. Okay, so now that's focusing on 2 things. That responds to 2 things right there. Firstly, I elaborated on what the language forms and features were, because for a 3 or 4 marker, if the question ever asks you how is it being done, you have to be specific about the language forms and features. And for a 3 to 4 marker, I'm going to have 2 to 3 pieces of evidence. So for example, if that was a 3 marker, I would use 2 pieces of quote, and I'd use 1 technique as symbolism, 1 as metaphor. And I'm linking it specifically back. Again, that bit's a bit made up because we don't know what the text is. But let's say the text talks about like a person's internal power, influenced by the external power. That's what I'm being specific about. I'm not just saying use this symbolism and metaphor to portray ideas about power. That's very vague. What ideas, right? I'm saying specifically ideas about the external and internal nature of power. That's more specific, and that gives me a leeway to then go in and straight talk about my points, analyze, and then get out, because I don't have a lot of time for a 3 to 4 marker. 6 to 7 marker, just here then, we are going in, we then have our intro evidence, we analyze our evidence, and we analyze again. My key for analysis is this. This is it. This is my go-to thing. It's stuck with me. I love it, and I advertise it like nothing else. QTEL, quote, technique, effect, and link. I think it honestly just is one of the easiest things to follow, and it really helps. So what it basically means is I talk about my quote. So I bring in a quote. I obviously have a idea before that, like a point, and then I bring in my quote. Then I talk about, or then I mention the technique in that quote, and then I elaborate on the effect of that technique. What is that technique doing? If it's symbolism, the effect of symbolism as a technique will be very different to the effect of metaphor. Too often I see the effect being like a vague link back. Like sometimes people just like link vaguely back to like the author's purpose here. That's not what we're doing here. You need to actually talk about what is the technique doing, what is it telling us. Sorry. Yeah, so what is it telling us? And then we link back to the question. Okay, and we'll go through like a sample question quickly, but that's that. So QTEL is my go-to, and finally we link back to the main point at the end, and we link back to our thesis there, just there. 67 marks, you kind of do the same thing. You have your intro, but you do 2 body paragraphs, so like a mini essay structure. For 6 marks, I'd aim for about two pieces of evidence per paragraph, so that's 4 altogether. For a 7 mark, I would vary that between 2 to 3, so I'd aim for 2 to 3 pieces of evidence per paragraph. So I'd have about I'd have about 4 to 6. I might go for 5, or I might just go for 6 pieces of evidence. I think that would probably be better. And then same analysis technique, same thing, your QTEL, that thing is the best, right? And then you at the very end have a short conclusion where you link to the question, and the short conclusion is only a sentence long. It does not have to be long. Same thing with your intro, it's not supposed to be long, just 1 to 2 sentences, even 1 sentence, just your topic sentence which links back to the which directly responds to the question. That's what the intro has to be. But then you would say in text 1, text 2, whatever the text is. Okay, there we go. Okay, now 2 tips, really important, or 1 tip really, is the number of marks, like the mark allocation here. So the general rule of thumb is Q equals n minus 1. So however many number of marks, subtract 1 from that, and that is your general vague idea of how many quotes you should be using. So for a 3 marker, right, so for a 3 marker, you want to use 2 quotes. For 4 marks, you want to use 3 quotes. Okay, that's what we are trying to do. And this is not something that's, like endorsed by NESA, like a rule of, like it's written in some rule book somewhere. It's just a general rule of thumb that we follow here at Cheat Smart, because I think it just makes sure that you have like more, like you have a good amount of evidence. Like for 4 marks, 3 pieces of evidence is good, because that means that you'll get probably 1 mark for your topic sentence, like for your first initial sentence, and then 3 marks allocated per piece of analysis. Yep, and that like there are responses out there that will they can still get full 4 marks with just 2 pieces of evidence, but that means that the analysis is probably like more like really good. That's sort of the case. A general rule of thumb. It's a general rule of thumb, but I think it just like ensures that you have sufficient evidence. You have more than sufficient evidence. Okay, now one of the key questions that I again get is how do I like figure out techniques in like the unseen text? Like, how do you actually identify techniques? How do you identify techniques? And the second part is, what do you do if you don't understand the unseen text? Those are 2 of the main questions. And again, if it's the chat right now, or if you were about to pop it in the chat, yeah, that's very cool. But no, this is because it's such a common question, and it is a question that makes so much sense, because we haven't done a lot of unseen text before. Like, you aren't given an opportunity to do a lot of it, and then it's just sort of thrown on you. And even with that, a lot of schools don't actually tend to focus on it a lot because of that study of the prescribed text in Common Mod. So this kind of takes like the backseat. But I'm here to help. We're here to help. So this is what we do. We want to make sure that essentially, in terms of techniques, how do you identify techniques? Go for the easy techniques. Like, actually make a table of a range of like normal common techniques for each of these forms. So with written text, you can get a prose fiction, you can get news, poetry, digital media, non-fiction. For visual text, you can get a painting, you can get a picture, you could get a cartoon, you could get a digital media, right? Make a table, right? Make a table and write down techniques, at least I'd say 5 to 6 techniques, and you'd find heaps on the internet. Just like literally search up literary techniques in poetry, literary techniques or techniques in photography, and you'd get so many on the internet. And just make a bank of 5 to 6. And whatever text you get, you are guaranteed to find those common techniques in there. They will be in there, right? In prose fiction, your simple stuff like tone of voice, metaphors, motives, repetition, anecdotes, rhetoric questions, all of that, go for the normal stuff. In your unseen text, you're not expected to make up techniques and, like be super sophisticated or whatever. Again, one of the common myths is that to get a band 6 you have to be really sophisticated. No, to get a band 6 you have to express your ideas clearly, your ideas have to flow and make sense, and that's it. Like, if you can write them sophisticatedly and you are succinct, great. Or no, not succinct, but if you are like using sort of like succinct sort of words and you're being very cohesive with it and to the point, great, that will absolutely get you the marks. But so will you using like like obviously formal but still like not the most academic, okay, not academic, but like you don't have to be using big words to get band 6s. That's what I'm trying to get at. If you are using big words, but great, awesome, but that doesn't mean that's the only way you're gonna get a band 6. That's a myth. Like, let go of that. Your ideas have to be clear, your ideas just have to flow, it has to be structured, and you just need to make sure that those foundational things that we've talked about up until now, thesis, analysis, structure of the essay, structure of the paragraphs, if you nail those things, you'll be fine. But yeah, 5 to 6 techniques for each of these. Note them down and then look for those common techniques. In terms of the second key question, not actually understanding the text, don't stress about it. It's an unseen text. You're not supposed to sit there and deconstruct the whole text. You take what you need, you find whatever you can find, you take that and you write about it. So one of the key things to remember with unseen text is that essentially, and this is one of the key things with English in general, is that it is whatever you think and however you interpret a question. So as long as you can back it up with evidence, you're going to get the marks. And in short answer questions, there's no one right or wrong answer. Like, there's no one right or wrong answer. The marking criteria is not going to say that the student should have talked about this portrayal of human experience specifically, or they should have talked about this idea in the text specifically, because everyone is different. Everyone's going to talk about like 10 different things for one question, but as long as you back up your idea with evidence from the text, you back that up, you give them good analysis, you're going to get your marks. So don't stress about sitting there and trying to understand the whole text. Take the evidence you need, take the ideas you need, and then leave. Literally, that's it. Yeah, and that's that. Okay, so let's now, I think this is the last bit from Common Mod. Now let us actually have a look at a sample response and put into play these key ideas that I've been talking about. How has symbolism been used to represent human motivations? So right now, I just want you to think to yourself, what would this question right there, in terms of this question, what are some things immediately in the topic sentence that you want to talk about? Now that we have discussed being like super direct in your topic sentence, what would some things you would do, right? Think about it. For example, you'd be specific about what motivations. You'd be specific about what motivations, and you would link back to symbolism. So let's have a look. Here we have our practice response. Okay, there we go. So let me pull up highlighters, and we are going to go through this together. So Text 1 utilizes symbolism as a dominant device for representing the contemporary human motivations on social media. So I am like from the very beginning, I'm being specific about the human motivations, and like the context of it in the text. So that's the first thing there, right? There you go. So that's the first direct response to the question, and I'm being specific and linking back to the contemporary audience here. So that's that. Now let's have a look at the next bit. Repetition of the symbolic Facebook thumbs up. So in the image, the Facebook thumbs up right there. Critically comments on the way we are motivated by extrinsic sources to determine our success. So repetition is our what? It's our technique, right? That's a technique. And we're linking it back to symbolism. We are linking it back to symbolism because that's what the question is asking us specifically. And this here is effect. It critically comments on the way we are motivated by extrinsic sources to determine our success. That's the effect of this technique, of the repetition of the symbolic Facebook thumbs up. Like the thumbs up is a symbolism of validation from other people. The quantitative value we consequently gain from online approval is visually conveyed through the pun of an ego being fed. This idea of ego being fed. So this is our effect again. Now I'm switching up the structure a bit. Instead of going quote technique effect, like I can switch it around. I could go technique. Oops. Oh goodness. Can I? No. Okay, let's see if that's gonna. Oh, perfect. Here we go. I'm gonna make sure of something very quickly. Okay, so where was I? Here we are. So this bit now here, so I was just saying with our QT Year, like you can vary up the structure. You can go technique, effect, quote, right? That's what we've done here. You can go effect, technique, quote. That's okay as well, as long as you go through each one. So here we are. So here's the effect of the technique. The quantitative value we constantly gain from online approval is visually conveyed through the pun of an ego being fed. That is our technique right there. Therefore, and last thing we do, so let's say this is a 3 marker, so I've got 3 pieces, so I've got 2 pieces of evidence, and the last thing I do is I sum it all up. Therefore, text 1's judicious use of symbolism seeks to reconfigure our inner desires, challenge assumptions on our behaviors, so be specific about what assumptions, and to encourage us to nourish ourselves with more purposeful human experiences as a result. Okay, so we've got the module concept that's been integrated throughout it, the idea of human motivations. It is unique to the question, so the relationship of the specified technique to the representation of human experience. And finally, audience impact and relevance is reinforced. So that's our sample response right there. Let us move forward now. I'll just quickly go through some practice resources. So you have you can find lots of practice questions, or well, 5 years worth of practice questions on NESA's website. On NESA's website, you can there's like a standard for standard they have a sample paper, and then they'll have the 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022 and 2023 2023's papers as well. And I've put in some images here for you for section 1, so have a look at these. Even if you just want to begin by identifying the techniques and writing like just sample analysis to it, or you could put a question to it. Like for both of these texts, for example, I think it links back really well to storytelling. So for example, this one could link back to language and the power of language. This one could link back to the idea of storytelling. So just use that as a way of like, yeah, practice. Okay, wonderful. Here we are, module A. So let me grab a quick sip of water. You do the same, and then let us move on to module A. Yeah, keep asking questions. I am sure Kayla's doing a wonderful job of helping you out. And yeah, and I hope what I have been talking through so far has been making sense. such a lovely day outside. It's so nice. Love summers. Anyways, okay, here we go. Let's do this. Module A. So, Module A is language, identity, and culture. We are looking at some key things that are similar to Common Mod, but some that are very different. So let's have a look. Essentially, Common Mod, we looked at, our focus was on human experiences. We focused on one text, and you would have probably studied a related text in the term as well. And it's all about our understanding of being human, of having, human motivations, having human complications. It's all about that. Whereas language, identity, and culture, now we're focusing on identity and culture specifically, and we're going to link it back to language and the portrayal of language. We are only looking at one text, and it's all about gaining new understanding from a variety of sources, and it's about gaining an understanding about culture and identity. What is overlapping between the two is the fact that we are still engaging in the use of language forms and features and how they have been used in the text, and we are also examining common themes and values. So let's talk about the basics here. The module will focus on the power of language to shape and reflect identity and culture. I would write that down. I think that's like the same way in which the idea of representation was a key with human experiences, like was a key with the syllabus. This is your key here. Every time you study your text, think about the power of language, how language is being used to shape and reflect on identity and culture. And if you do that, if you have that focus, I think it would help you a lot when it comes to writing your essays. So you study one prescribed text. You can study that. You may study it along with a range of other short texts that are relevant to learning, but it's all about that one text. And this is what you are studying in that one text. So this is what we're doing. Here are the key concepts that we are going to break down. Yeah. So language has the power to both reflect and shape individual and collective identity. That's the key here. That's the key there. And in this module, students consider how their responses to written, spoken, audio, and visual text can shape their self-perception. How language can be used to affirm, ignore, reveal, challenge, or disrupt prevailing assumptions and beliefs about themselves, individuals, and cultural groups. This is our audience impact right there. That's our audience impact. It is obviously pretty big, but this is what you are coming back to. Again, I would jot these, key things down. So let's break down these key concepts. Language. What is language? It is a system of communication which consists of sounds, words, grammar, or it is a system of communication that is used by people in a particular country, or those that are doing a particular type of work. That's language. What is identity? Identity is, as defined according to Google, is the effect of being who or what a person or thing is, the distinguished character or personality of an individual, our own individuality, our condition of being. It is our qualities, so qualities of a person or a group that make them different from others. And yeah, it's about qualities, beliefs, personalities, looks, and expressions that make a person or a group. That's what identity is all about. So identity then can be individual or collective. So it could be personal, it can be familial, it can be communal, it can be generational, national, cultural, and societal. Identity is all of those things. We have our personal identities, we have our familial identities. As a family, we have an identity, and we have a community identity. So, whichever community you belong to, that's part of your identity. And community can be so many things. It's not just one, cultural group. It could be community, can be so many things. Generational identity, like Gen Z's, right? Generational identity, national identity, our cultural identity, and also our societal identity, us as a society. Identity can be authentic or inauthentic. Identity can be so this is where we ask ourselves these questions and we use our text to answer these questions. Is the idea of ourself a construction, or do we choose who we are, or is it or is it a result of our culture? What is identity? Is it something that we consciously choose, or is it something that we just adopt from what we have around us? And identity can be multidimensional. Our identity can be influenced, and it can change, and it can mold, and it can, develop in light of our gender, our nation, our work, our private and our public life. So we can have all these different identities. So it's not one static thing. Identity is a very it's not just this one static thing. And this is what we need to kind of link back to in our text. What is identity? Does your text represent individual identities? How does it comment on collective identities? Does it comment on identity being authentic or inauthentic? How does it comment about how does it comment on the dimensionality of identity? So, finally, culture. So, the ideas, customs, and social behaviors of particular people or society, that is culture. And throughout Module A, you will hear references to cultural perspectives. This is a very key term that you will come across this year. And it refers to how particular groups that are connected by distinguishers such as class, nationhood, or certain experiences like immigration, how we view the world, how our cultural perspectives. So our cultural perspectives essentially are a way of viewing the world, a way which is influenced by our groups, like our class or our nationhood, or our experiences, how that shapes the way in which we view the world around us. So students deepen their understanding of how language can affirm, ignore, reveal, challenge, or disrupt prevailing assumptions and beliefs about themselves, individuals, and cultural groups. So this is where we're linking back to our prevailing assumptions. So we are thinking about what prevailing assumptions or beliefs, for example stereotypes about certain identities and cultures exist, and how does your text respond to these. Remember, with Mod A, remember that language has power. Language is a tool to persuade and manipulate the way we think. It's a tool to achieve certain goals. And think about language and the use of language in in the world around us, in media, in in the way in which we interact with other people, in our institutions where we work, where we study, in corporations and governments. It's about how language is used to achieve certain goals, and the use of language in a certain way is used to achieve certain goals. That may be to make you think a certain way, that may be to make you think or validate a certain opinion. And propaganda now can seem like a historical relic, but it's not. Because with the expanded accessibility of the world media, and of media, for example, through the internet and social media, texts are being created with the intent to implant ideas in your head. They're being created to have a certain effect. They're being created to show you something. Sometimes it can be to show you the world around us simply as it exists, and that's kind of not true, because no one sees the world simply as it exists. We see the world how we think of the world, so it's obviously very subjective. But nonetheless, language can be used to understand how and why texts are constructed, what are they trying to do, and how they could be manipulating you. And here is an example for example. Here is an example for example. So here we go. This is an example from this is a government-produced text which evokes emotions in you that will, if successful, influence your behavior. So speeding, no one thinks big of you. So this idea of this humorous gesture to show you that speeding drivers are inferior, and through that it discourages the audience from speeding and therefore abiding the law. So with Mod A, we now also have to investigate how textual forms and conventions, as well as language structures and features, are used to communicate information, ideas, values, and attitudes. Really important that you focus on this idea of textual forms and conventions. If you have a look, and I would recommend that you have a look at past papers, you'd see that that there is a huge focus on textual forms and conventions. So sometimes they can literally ask you, right? They can literally ask you, for example, they can ask you, for example, the use of, like, how does drama, let's say your text is a drama, so how does drama use this convention, or how do drama conventions show are used to show certain ideas about cultural perspectives, or whatever. Like, it could do that for any of the forms, right? It could say, how are conventions of prose fiction utilized to challenge your ideas about cultural perspectives in your prescribed text. So those types of questions, that's where you need to make sure that you have a good understanding of textual forms and conventions, and you link it back to and also of language structures and features as well. Alrighty, so and I think that's the beauty of English, like, being able to to study these big ideas of how language works, and what it does. And it's not just about the one text you're reading, but about this big idea of what you're taking away from it. But anyways, let's now come back to this idea of the module rubric and how we can summarize it. So the module rubric, basically, then we can think of it in terms of a Venn diagram, and how your analysis, the ideas that you take away from it, they are going to be here. They are going to be basically this cohesive interaction between language, ideas about culture, and identity, and this is where your analysis lies. You're putting these three ideas together. So when you approach Module A, when you begin analyzing your text, again, I would write down these three questions. I think these are really important. When you're approaching your analysis, just ask these questions every time. Ask yourself, how is language used here, and why? Not just the how, but also the why. Why is it being used this way, right? What is the author trying to achieve here? What are they trying to show us? And for example, ask yourself, are cultural words being used here? Is this written from first person or third person? And that will tell you a couple of things. If it's written for first person, it could be an author writing from their own experiences and trying to break down maybe some of the assumptions that people have about their culture. Or if it's written from a third person, it could be creating assumptions about a certain culture. Identity, what identities are being shaped, right? And what is being said about these identities? How do we know this? And we know this through language. What are the features and forms being used here to have a certain effect? And finally, think about how are whole communities or cultures being shaped? What is being said about these communities? And again, how do you know this? You know this via language. So, like I said, I reckon write down these three questions, and when you start analyzing your text, come back to these three questions. Ask yourself these three big questions, because this is the foundation of the rubric. Right, these three all directly link back to the rubric, and I think that gives you a really, really good way to actually engage with the rubric while you're studying your text. So let's talk about some of these key definitions. Let me just quickly grab a sip. Okay, here we go. Let's begin by looking at textual form. So let's look at textual form refers to text type, so that includes poetry, drama, prose fiction, etc. Right, so it's the type of your text. Conventions are the characteristics of a particular category of text, like like the conventions of poetry, right? Like the stanza structure, things like enjambment, things like fragmentation, linearity. Those are some really common conventions, or conventions of the Western genre, or conventions of like writing. Again, things like characterization, things like linearity, right? So these are the key characteristics of a particular category of text. Language structures, these are the arrangements, or like the particular arrangement of the text. It can include things like perspective and the tense that is used. Language features, these are the language devices or the techniques. And values, so values refer back to beliefs, principles, or ideas. And finally, attitudes, that is a way of thinking or feeling about something. So here we are. Now again, we're going to link it, so again, link it back to these three main ideas. And if you do that, this is essentially this is essentially a really good way to link your analysis back to the link your analysis back to the rubric. So now, when we summarize all of it, we can say that language is constructed meaningfully. And this means that language can represent ideas about identity and or culture. So there's this link again back here to this idea of representation, but now we're focusing on identities and we're focusing on culture and cultural perspectives. Language, remember, again, also is shaped to construct meaning, and that can shape our ideas about identities and culture. So language can represent ideas, but language can actually also shape identities and culture. Like, it can help shape identities and culture. It can, so first it represents, and then it can help shape identities and culture. So language is really powerful like that. And this is where we need to link the two, that through representing ideas in the text about certain identities, about certain cultures, it actually shapes these identities and culture. And this will be something that is highly specific to your prescribed text. Like, this is not a generic thing. This is where your analysis and your study of the text shines through. Cool. Now, these are the prescribed texts that you will look at. You may already know yours. More than likely, you already know yours. If you aren't doing Mod A next term when you begin, then it could mean that you're starting with Mod B or something. But nonetheless, these are the texts, and they all give us some really, really good insights into ideas, really good insights into identity and culture. So definitely, look for that when you're studying your text, and use those 3 questions that I highlighted earlier to shape your study. So here we are, the essay, the freaking essay. Well, how do you write it? What do we write? So it's 20 marks worth, like other essays. So it's 20 marks worth. It is 40 minutes long. So unfortunately, unlike Common Mod, you don't get 45 minutes, which is a real pain, but it is what it is. And it deals with your one prescribed text. And here is the sort of the rubric, what you'll be assessed on. And here we go. So you need to demonstrate understanding of how ideas about language, identity, and culture are expressed. So we already know that. How language is used to shape meaning. And organize, develop, and express those ideas using language that is appropriate to audience. That's just using your formal language in your essay structure to express ideas to your markers. So, kinds of questions you can get. Here are 3 examples. So, first one is just a direct statement that is plugged from the syllabus. To what extent does your prescribed text disrupt assumptions about culture? So, pretty straightforward. Now, remember, even if the question doesn't mention identity or language, you will talk about all 3 in your essay. You can't just focus on culture and leave identity. You need to talk about all 3 and link it all together. It's just really important to make sure of that. The second example, examine how sound and music contribute to the representation of identity and culture in One Night the Moon. So here we're talking about conventions. These are conventions of film. So they actually want you to focus on conventions. So you can see that the question can be like pretty specific when it comes to like form, features, and conventions. So really important to not ignore the use of form in your text. Alright, And in this case, you can see that this is basically like the key part of the question. This is the prescribed focus in this question right here: sound and music, conventions of film, and then linking it back to the representation of identity and culture. Now, in this question, they don't mention language. They just say sound and music, which does not mean that you don't talk about language and you just talk about sound and music, because that is language in itself too, right? That is using language to convey ideas. So don't forget, you need to talk about all three, even if the question doesn't mention all three. Next one, drama relies primarily on characterization. Again, form, that's form, and those are our conventions to create cultural tension. That's our link back to the rubric. That's the rubric focus we're looking at, cultural tension. So that's that. And last example, analyze how language is used to express ideas about community identity. Now that's putting this idea of cultural perspectives and identity together. So 4 questions, all 4 really different from one another, but that doesn't mean that we like, for example, we need to make sure that you have a go at all of these past HSC questions. Obviously not now, because you haven't, read and analyzed your text yet. But once you have done that, have a go at those HSC questions. They're all very different from one another. But that, obviously you don't know what the question you're going to get given is. But this is how you improve. This is how you make sure that you are able to answer any question that comes your way. So, yeah, that's that. So, Module A essay, remember you have to engage with the ideas of your rubric and your text. So to answer these questions spontaneously and actually believe what you're writing, that means you can't go in with a memorized text. We are very, very, very anti-memorized essays in here. Can I just say that right now? If it has worked for you in the past, if if your friends use it and it's worked for them, 70-ish% of it probably is a bit of a fluke, that the question that you get on the day just works. It just works. Luck is a thing, right? I believe luck's a thing anyway. Right, so it's a thing. So you can get lucky, and it can be like, yep, you've gone over the memorized essay. It's been a very basic memorized essay that links back to a concept, and that's the concept that's been tested. Very awesome, like great. But the chances of that happening every time, and especially for like a big HSC question where the question can be super it can be super broad, how language is used, and it can be really specific. Sound and music, like of all the conventions, sound and music, characterization as a convention, like you can't go in with one essay thinking that it's going to fit to every question. That's just not how it works. And if they wanted you to have memorized essays, they would have just given you the question and been like, okay, this is a question, work on a perfect essay the whole term. Again, that's not how it works. They don't want you to do that. They don't want you to work on one essay the whole term, write the perfect essay, remember it like nothing else, and go in and write that essay word for word and regurgitate that. That's what students, they didn't give the questions, but that's what students used to do a lot, because the types of questions and so that's what students used to do a lot before the syllabus change in 2019. And that was one of the key reasons they actually changed the syllabus and they did a revamp, was because students were just memorizing essays and writing them down. There was no actual application of the content. You may not love English, and that's totally okay, but there is a reason they want you to study it. They want you to look at how language is being used to shape your ideas, and and this idea in itself about how language is being used is bigger than just English, like HSC English. It's about understanding these influences around you that are trying to feed you specific ideas about specific things. So you can't go into the exam room with one essay thinking whatever question it is, you're going to write that one essay. Because what happens with that is that you go in with that idea, you get given, and you get so fixated on making the question fit your essay, because that's all you have, right? You've basically put all your eggs in one basket and said, this is the essay I'm going to go in with. No matter what the question is, I'm just going to go in with that. And it's like, how can you confidently go in with the answer to a question you don't even know. Yeah, like it's for example, it's like, you know, in those game shows where you answer before you even let the whole question finish, and then you get the wrong answer. That's kind of this whole thing of memorized essays. You can't memorize an essay and go in and be like, this is the essay I'm going to write. You have to write spontaneously, and that's what you're working on. That's the skills you're developing. Writing your analysis, you know, doing different essay questions. It is to develop these skills so that you can write an essay and you can actually believe and understand the ideas you're writing, and you're not just trying to make something fit into a question that you don't even know. So really, really important. And you know, again, and I know sometimes it may have worked for you in junior years, but remember, junior years were different. The types of essay questions you would get would be very it'd be pretty sort of vague, and also it would be shaped by, remember, it'd be shaped by what your teacher is teaching in class. Your teacher's writing the question, they're focused on a certain idea, they're focused on certain themes, and they'll give you questions about that. But that's not the HSC. There are, you know, thousands of students doing those questions out there, right? Tens of thousands of students who've studied the same text as you, who've all been taught that text in different ways. So NESA's not going to, you know, give everyone a question that everyone likes. They're going to give you a specific question which they pick up from the rubric that you don't know unless you work in NESA, which you wouldn't. And that's what the question is. So don't go in with a memorized essay. That's my key tip from today. If it's been working for you, great, but that doesn't mean it will continue to work for you. If it's worked in the past, don't rely on that. Don't rely on that one thing just always working out, because it can backfire. It may not, but it can. There's a high chance that it can, because you don't know what the question is. So what do you do then? Right? What you do is you study your text. You link it back to the rubric, you study it through the eyes of the rubric, you go ahead and you do your analysis. So you go ahead and you do your analysis, you find these ideas in the text, you find the themes that you like, you link it back to the rubric, and you find your quotes, and those are the quotes that you're going to go in with. So yes, you do go in with memorized quotes, because obviously you're not going to sit there on the day and flip through a book and, you know, find quotes, because A, you're not taking your book said, B, you're not, you know, 40 minutes, you're sitting there deciding, so which quote should I use today, right? That's not how it works. You're going to go in, the best way to do it, and the most popular way that everyone does it, is that you pick out your quotes, you find quotes that you like, you find quotes that link back to the rubric, you analyze those quotes, you focus on the analysis a lot, you write, you know, you can write the first sort of like a master essay, and then you focus on adapting that, not memorizing the master essay and then writing to different questions. You focus on the analysis, you write that master essay, and then you try to adapt those ideas across a range of different questions. And then you get to a point where you don't even need that initial essay. You know your analysis, you know your quotes, you look at the essay, you look at the question, you break it down, and you write a response to it spontaneously. And that's where your marks lie. So please don't bet on a memorized essay. Again, may have worked for you in the past, amazing if it has, lucky you, but it's a very risky thing to do. It's very risky to go in prepared with an answer to a question that you don't know. Just like logically, and I hope that makes sense, like rationally, it's just not a rational thing to do. So no memorizing. Instead, we're going to focus, we're going to go step by step. It's a gradual progress, right? You're going to read your text, you're going to look at it through the eyes of the rubric, you're going to find your quotes, you're going to analyze your quotes, you're going to write that first essay, then you're going to practice writing, then you're going to practice adapting that essay, and you're going to get to a point where you can do the whole thing closed book, so you don't remember your essay, but you know your quotes, you know the ideas that you've talked about, and then you write essays, timed essays, to a range of practice questions, and you get to a level of confidence after having a go at multiple different types of questions, where you know that whatever the question is, you can manipulate your arguments, you can manipulate your analysis to write to a question on the given day. And that's the recipe to success. It may not be the only recipe, but I do think it's one of the most popular recipes out there. Cool. So let's talk about the essay structure. So as you can tell, we are very passionate in here about that, because I just see, yeah, I see it a lot, and I know a lot of the times it hasn't worked out, and I obviously wish the very, very best for you. So that's my suggestion. It's a suggestion. It's not, you know, yeah, it's a suggestion. It's a recommendation, and I think there is a logical and rational reasoning behind that. I'm not just saying it because I woke up today and chose that we're not going to memorize essays in this house. I'm saying it because there's rational research, and not research, but experience and sort of opinion behind it, which makes a lot of sense. So let's have a look at the essay structures now. All right, let's have a go. So let's talk about thesis first. Remember, we talk about our thesis statements and we place so much emphasis on a thesis statement, and I'm just realized I'm really running out of time here, so I'm going to try and hurry up. We place emphasis on the thesis statement because a thesis statement gives a paper direction. It allows your reader to follow your argument. Your reader is your marker. They're giving you your HSC mark, so you want to make it as clear as you possibly can for them. You want to make it as straightforward, as to the point as you possibly can. And this is the first thing that HSC markers will read. And this was the first things, for example, that my English teacher told us when we started year 12, was that and she had been doing HSC marking for a long time, and she does HSC marking. She knows what she's talking about. And the first thing she said was that markers read your thesis statement, and by reading your thesis statement, they can 9 out of 10 times put you in a band category straight away, which doesn't mean that they just read the thesis statement and go, all right, next, that's a band 5, next, band 6 thesis, next. That's not what they do. Obviously they're going to read the whole essay, but 9 out of 10 times they can determine the quality of your essay and argument by just reading your thesis statement, by just telling if you have repeated the question back, if you have tried to break down the question, or if you've actually broken down the question effectively, added ideas to it, elaborated on it, and linked it conceptually back to your text. Is it an easy thing to do? No. But is it something that we can develop throughout the term and get to a point where our theses are like that? Absolutely. So that's why thesis statements are really, really important. And this is where, if you have a good thesis statement that you know what you're writing about, you can link back to it in your arguments. Because as I was saying earlier, one of the key downfalls that I see in essays is that link back just does not, it's not there. It's either non-existent or it's not done very clearly, because sometimes we can get confused ourselves about, what we've written about at the beginning. And a lot of the times what happens is you see the question, you immediately start writing, and you don't actually think about what your thesis, what your argument's going to be. You won't have a lot of direction later to come back and link to the text. And it's like you kind of, you just begin writing immediately without a plan. And then, you might get halfway and you realize you don't kind of have a very solid link back to the question. So we don't want to be in that position, which is why we want to break down the question first. We want to think about our thesis. We want to think about what we're actually saying and answering, and then constantly link back to it in our analysis. Constantly link back to that when we do our QTE, and this is where we link. This is the link back. Okay, so writing a thesis statement step by step. We unpack the question first, we then consider the syllabus, we consider your ideas about the text, we draft an answer, and then we check its effectiveness by mapping it against the rest of the essay. So what that means here is we have to essentially try and unpack, you begin by unpacking the question and then drafting a response to the question. So this is what it looks like, simplified. Unpack the question first. Your thesis is a response to the question. It is a response to the question. It's not a repetition of the question. It is not just vaguely trying to break down the question. It has broken down the question and it's answering the question. All right, and then you need to first, and so in order to do that, you need to first understand the question, and you need to understand what it is asking you to do, and a really good way to do that is to get out your highlighters and start highlighting the key terms and using that as a way to really think deeply about the question. Then you consider ideas from the syllabus. What part of the syllabus is it linking back to? How can you bring your knowledge of those ideas into your answer? So knowledge of those is like how those ideas have been expressed in your prescribed text. And remember, it's important because your thesis has to be in tune with what the markers asked you to study. And what the markers asked you to study is written in the rubric. That's what they want you to study. Syllabus will give you key terms and ideas that you could include in your thesis, and if you have too many ideas about the text, the syllabus can help you streamline those. So if you've got like too many ideas, the syllabus can help you figure out exactly which ones you should be talking about in light of the text. Or if you don't have enough ideas, again, the syllabus can inspire you. Like anytime you feel stuck in your essay, you're writing and you feel stuck, go back to the syllabus. Go back to the syllabus and try to think about some ideas that you can link back. Then consider your ideas about the text. This is really important because this is what you have worked towards. This is what you have prepared for. These are the ideas in the text that are brought into focus by the syllabus. That's the key. Sorry, that are brought into focus by the question. So ideas in the text that the question that specifically the question's focusing on. So if the question, for example, is about sound and music, like the earlier ones, so how sound and music is used to shape ideas about cultural identity, then we are going to focus on ideas about cultural identity in the text that has been shaped by the use of sound and music, and that idea has been brought into light by the question. That's what the question wants us to focus on. Then we draft an answer, and then we check its effectiveness by mapping out against the essay. Really important. Now, two things with drafting the answer, super important, and this is something you do when you're practicing, right? You might write a couple of drafts and then you choose the strongest one, but obviously the more you practice, the more you'll be able to synthesize, your ideas and write that perfect draft as you go, like, the first time round. So the first time round you do it, it may take you a couple of times to write it out, to find which one is the best, but the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And after a while you'll be able to write down the perfect, or not the perfect, because nothing's perfect, but the most suitable thesis from the get-go. So last thing, check its effectiveness by mapping out against the rest of the essay. This is just putting your thesis statement to test. So this is where you want to check out that you can actually write 3 different paragraphs that link back to this thesis statement. So we're going to put that into practice. And I'm going to do that with a common module question, because that's the module we've all done. That is the text, like the text will be more, well, you may not all have done the same text, but the ideas you'll be most familiar with because you haven't done Mod A yet, or most of you probably haven't. So this is what we're going to do. Let's have a look at this question. In what ways, whatever your text is, offers new insights into the anomalies of human behavior and motivations? So we unpack the question. In what ways is focusing specifically on the method, style, or manner of doing something? So how exactly is something being done here? New insights refers to new ways, new ideas. Anomalies, remember, something that deviates from the standard. Human behavior is how humans act, and human motivations is the driving forces there. So we've broken down the question. Now we unpack it. We want to think about what anomalies in the human behavior and motivations are present in the text. Then we want to think about what method or style in which they're represented. And then we want to think about what is it telling us about our understanding of the human behavior. What is something new that we are learning from it? And this is going in a reversed order, but this is actually, now we know what the question is asking us. So in terms of considering the syllabus now, this is the part of the syllabus. Like, it's pretty straightforward. Anomalies in human behaviors and motivations. It's about the complexity, right? That's the part from the syllabus. It's looking at how human experiences are complex. So consider your ideas about the text. Let's use Crucible as an example, a very famous, a very popular text, that, you know, very popular HSC text. So we'll use this one. And we're not going to consider firstly what so each of the three questions we're going to answer in light of the crucible. What anomalies in the human behavior and motivations are being presented? We're going to talk about how that all of the characters at times behave in ways that are counterintuitive, and that go against their own beliefs and best interests. So they deviate from the standard and accepted view. And some examples to use can include John Proctor, Abigail, Mary Warren, etc. Then we're going to consider how is it being represented. Because we're focusing on these characters, we're going to focus on the fact that the main way in which the insight is offered is through characterization and character arcs. So now we're being specific about it. I'm not just being vague that it does this, you know, new ways. I'm actually being specific. What way in what way am I seeing these new ideas come through? So this could just be one approach. There can be so many approaches that you can take. Then we draft an answer. So here we go. This is a thesis statement here. Through characterization character arcs whereby human actions are represented as incongruous to their goals. Arthur Miller's 1953 drama The Crucible challenges assumptions about the logical cause and effect between human motivation and behavior, reflecting the complexity of human experience. So, characterization, that's ways. Yep, that's ways. Actually, I just realized why am I doing this? I've written it down. Characterization and character arcs. That's ways. That is answering the what ways part of the question. Human actions are represented as incongruous to their goals. It's going against what we think. It's an anomaly, right? It's anomaly in human behavior and a motivation. So a behavior, like our behavior, our actions are different to our goals, to our motivations. It challenges assumptions. This is the new idea. This is a link to the syllabus. Challenges assumptions about the logical cause and effect between motivation and behavior. So that is demonstrating what is new about the insight. It's actually challenging this idea of the logical cause and effect relationship. And here is our link back to the syllabus, and and thus reflecting the complexity of the human experience. So now we check if this thesis is effective by mapping it out against the rest of our essay. So what we do is, so I'm saying so I am basically saying in a nutshell, the characters' actions are represented as incongruent to their goals, challenging assumptions about a logical cause and effect relationship. So I'm going to link all three of my theses back to that. So I'm going to begin with, for example, Proctor, and say his affair with Abigail is inconsistent with his values, and his pride and reluctance to be truthful puts him at risk. So that logical relationship between his values and his actions, we can see that is challenged here. Same thing with Abigail, same thing with Mary Warren, and I can see that I can link back effectively to each of these themes, to each of my themes here, and as a result, my thesis is effective. So your thesis for what a statement, it has to be some kind of statement about language, identity, and culture. Remember, even if the question just mentions language or identity, just one of them, you are still going to talk about all three of them. You can't skip out on one. So your intro is your thesis statement. It answers the question. We've already talked a lot about thesis statement today. And even though we've talked about it, like for example, at the beginning with common mod, it's the same thing with mod A. The focus changes. Now you're talking about now you're talking about language, identity, and culture. But the structure and the idea of answering and giving a direct response to the question remains the same. We introduce the main points you'll be making in the body paragraph, and then you introduce your text. Alright, so that includes the author's name and the year that the text was written or published. Body paragraphs 2 to 3 are fine. They prove your thesis. Remember, they have to prove your thesis. That's really important. And include your quotes and detailed analysis of your text. Analysis, go back to QTEL. That's that. Okay, and remember, it has to include some discussion of language form. Sometimes you can get lucky and the question will ask you about form. And then in that case, this is like the forefront of your essay. But even if the question doesn't ask you about form, you need to link back to this idea of forms, convention, structure, and features. Here is a sample answer. Let's have a look at it. I am aware of the time, so I am hurrying up a bit. Let's see. Explain how a text captures unique cultural perspectives. In your response, make close reference to your prescribed text. So the text can offer, so here we go. How a text captures unique cultural perspectives. You're going to break this down. Remember, we need to elaborate on this. Text can offer a window into experiences of other cultures. So that's my first sort of line. I can have 1 to 2 lines for thesis. That's totally okay, but no more than that. And this is pretty short, but this is like a really overarching statement here. The text can offer a window into the experiences of other cultures, right? Unique cultural perspectives. In doing so, they inform us of the unique cultural perspectives that emerge from bilingualism. So this is the how part of it. Explain how a text captures unique personal perspectives, and we're saying that it's actually true that the how in the case of this text is going to be through bilingualism. And so here we go. Oang, so, and my sincere apologies if I'm pronouncing the name wrong, but Oang writes to share his personal experiences of the difficulties of learning the English language in his poem New Accents. Firstly, Oang uses phonetic spelling to introduce the stereotypes associated with foreign accents, evident in the Nation Street and Criminal. So here we are introducing an idea that he's writing from his personal experiences about the difficulties of learning the English language. So that's his unique cultural perspective, right? That's his unique cultural perspective. He first here's a technique. He uses phonetic spelling to introduce stereotypes. That's my evidence right there. And then I'm saying that this poetically explores how language can serve as a barrier to communication. That's the effect of the technique, right? The phonetic spelling is poetically exploring, so it's a technique as well. So it's a form technique as well. It's poetically exploring how language can serve as a barrier to communication rather than allowing it to be successfully achieved. The motive of anguish again uses phonetic spelling to synonymize the use of fractured English with the inability to completely integrate into Australian society. So this bit here again is the effect, okay, and it's about showing that unique cultural perspective. Despite the barrier language creates the poet presents a pun with their English and my anguish to unite his experience of being bilingual with acceptance. He makes English his own and challenges the reader's understanding of what language encompasses. Therefore, his efforts reflect a continuing endeavor to use language as an empowering method for capturing his unique and enriching perspective. And here is a checklist for Module A. I'll leave that for you to have a look at. Remember, you can download the slides, so definitely check it out. How do you study for Mod A? Tables. Tables are really good, and these are really good for your analysis, quote technique analysis. So that could be like an effect, and this could be like a link back. Either way, whichever sort of formatting works best for you, but use tables. Tables are really good, and especially closer to the HSC, my key advice is to make like your QTEL table, so you know exactly what your analysis is. And when you're studying like open book, you have that page in front of you, and you know you're writing your essays, and you're just looking at the analysis. You're not looking at any other essays you've written. You are just using the analysis to write your essay. And then slowly you start removing that paper or only looking at it when you have to, and you know just begin writing your essays without any stimuli, like writing from your head, but using the quotes and analysis that you've got, and linking it back to like these ideas, these rubric ideas as well. They work really good for open practice. They can help you with a structure, and they ensure that your thesis is still something you can write about. Ultimately, do what works best for you. My method personally, I like writing paragraphs, like doing practice essays. They're a pain. You have to get yourself to sit down and do it, but they are the best way to work in English. Writing practice essays, getting feedback, writing again. That's it. That's like the key to success in English, and also making quote banks. And here are some samples, and these are from a range of different tutors. So these slides, obviously, we revamp them every time, but it does include a lot of things from a lot of different tutors. We all put our little inputs into it. This is from one of our past tutors, and you can see how they had their they looked at paragraphs, they made quote banks, and this is clearly very awesome. So there's that. Now in terms of how I would prepare for Mod A, cast aside all frustration, boredom, try to enjoy the text. Try to enjoy it. I know it's hard if you don't like English, if you yeah, if you don't like it, if it's a pain, I get it, but try to enjoy it. That like consciously try. That can help. Think critically about these ideas. Like try use those questions from earlier to guide your analysis. Again, that will make your analysis like really like more easier that and yeah, more easier than it may be if you just like do it, like if you just try to, yeah, do it without any direction, and then write as many practice paragraphs and essays as you can. Only way to improve it in English, really. Cool. Mod C, I'll quickly go through this. We've got 3 minutes on the clock, so we might just go a bit over, but I'm just quickly going to go through it. Mod C, you are basically, this is what you're doing. You are going to read a range of prescribed texts to learn how they've been constructed and use that to write your own text. So, we're going to talk about a couple of key ideas here. Remember, you have access to these slides, so I'll leave a bit there, but I'm just going to go through the main ideas here. When you think about writing, and creative writing is the most popular one here, but in the rubric it says, and in the HSC you can be asked to write persuasive, discursive, creative, and the rubric also mentions informative, but we haven't seen a question about it, informative writing yet in the HSC. But here we go. What makes good creative writing? It recognizes the economy of the words. Every word has to have a purpose. Think carefully about where every word goes. It balances aspects of fictional writing, so well. So you want to have that subtlety in your expression, so characterizing, setting, imagery. Having believable and well-paced frameworks. You only have 40 minutes to write it. You're only writing like what, 5 to 6 pages, yeah, depending on the mark allocation, right? At the very most 7 to 8 pages, at the very least 5 to 6 pages, depending on the mark allocation. But nonetheless, you don't have a lot of time to actually to actually, you know, go ahead and write like a big novella. Novella, sure, but to write like a big like a magnum opus, like you don't have time to do that. So it has to be paced well, which means don't try to go don't try to aim for more than 2 to 3 scenes, because that means there'd be like a lot happening. Anything in excess of that is just like, it's a lot, because you need to make sure it's paced well. It's paced well. So yeah, have it well paced. Make sure you're judicious about dialogue, so only use dialogue when you need it, and use it well. Have research behind it if you're talking about like historical ideas or something, or ideas where you are bringing in factual information, and make sure that your intention and purpose is subtly expressed. You have to have an intention, a purpose for your writing, so that you can talk about it in your reflection. So make sure you do that. Here is a sample. So here we go. With Peggy paces around the block, she was greeted with a line of uniform apartments. Each had arched windows like aligned desks in a classroom, carved with silhouettes of cabaret amateurs, philosophical cats, and pastel frocks concealed with aprons. The rows and columns moved as if they were frames of film in procession, animating her rhapsodic journey. Crossing towards the corner of Lenox Avenue, her pleated skirt followed in an effortless twirl. A motor car trailed lazily behind. So you can see this writing is very descriptive but detailed. It balances action with setting and imagery. So she is walking, she's looking, but there's a really good dose of setting and imagery. It is controlled. Each sentence belongs there, and you want to write what you know. So these ideas, the author has written them. So I haven't written this piece, but we've got one of our past tutors written it, and you can clearly tell that they know what they're writing about. They've got this clear setting in their mind. Show, don't tell. Key. Show, don't tell. All right. So if I want to say Susie was cold, I can say it in dialogue. So I can show it through dialogue, I can show it through action, I can show it through setting. I don't want to say Susie was cold, I want to show that Susie was cold. Somehow, she could say that it's quite chilly, she could wrap a scarf around her neck because she's cold, or there could be like an icy breeze which circled the room, and standing right underneath the air conditioner, Susie shivered. Susie was cold. Okay, what makes a good discursive, persuasive, or informative writing? It has direction and objective. You write appropriately for the audience. It has research and evidence, and your ideas are subtly expressed. How do you get better at writing? Do lots of it. Draw inspiration from lots of things, emulate and transform the stylistic features of the authors you're reading, so your prescribed text, from Modsey and also from other texts as well. Strive to be more critical and reflective of your intention. Use your prescribed text, right? Your prescribed text, you're not analyzing them like you did with Common Mod, Mod A, Mod B. You are just studying them to see what techniques they're using, how they're written, and anything that gets you excited, anything where you go, wow, oh my god, how did they do that? Those are the types of techniques that you want to emulate in your own text because you find that interesting. Use different text types. You don't just have to use prose fiction all the time. For example, in creative writing, so you can write poems, letters, diary entries, and you can experiment. There is room for that. If you're struggling to come up with ideas, think about current issues, think about ideas that you find worth voicing. But one key thing I'll say is, remember, this is for the purpose of the HSC, so you want to stay clear of sensitive and also like sensitive topics as well, because it's for the HSC, so that's just that. But think about current issues, like climate change, like these big ideas that you feel passionate about and that you think are worth voicing. Do's and don'ts: be aware of the believability of your writing, maintain control, have alternate endings. So this can help you with this top one, there can help you with adapting your piece to different questions for the exam, and having a perspective, even if you're writing from multiple perspectives. Don't write something that goes nowhere. Make sure it goes somewhere, has some purpose. Writing with no message or purpose, that's really important. You need to make sure that you have a message or purpose as an author. Now, general study tips: practice plans, practice thesis, essay plans, whole essays. Practice is the key for English. Force yourself to write something a fortnight. As you get closer to the exams, do it weekly. Remember, a body paragraph a day keeps the bad pause away. Not my statement, but a very many wanted that. But that's, I think, really, really good. So if you want good marks, do practice. Use the rubric and use practice questions. Most importantly, do not leave study for last minute, because you don't want to put yourself in that position. And here are some practice questions for Common Mod section A, section 1 for you, that you can have a look at. And yes, I hope you asked Kayla lots of questions, and I'm sure she helped you out today, and I hope you found this lecture helpful. And thank you guys so much for coming. I will see you guys hopefully for all our other lectures this year. Remember, we have them every holiday, so sign up. We have lots of resources, check them out. And that's it for today. Best of luck, wishing you guys all the very best. You will smash it out. Just keep working hard, and you'll get there. Have a wonderful day ahead, guys. Take care.